After Jason has left with the children, the chorus laments because now they have no more hope that the children will survive. They perceive that everything's been set into motion and there's no going back. Now, weirdly enough, the chorus still seems to sympathize with Medea and even condemns Jason. The chorus describes Jason as a poor fool who is unknowingly bringing about the destruction of both his new wife and his children. Of Medea, however, the chorus still says, "I grieve now for your anguish." So again, they're not blaming Medea specifically, but her anguish as the cause for her impending murders. Now the tutor returns to Medea with the children to announce that the banishment has been waived and Glaus now has the poisoned bridal gifts. The tutor is surprised that Medea isn't happier about this, and Medea simply says, "This is what the gods and I devised, I and my foolish heart." So again, there's that suggestion that she doesn't really want this, or she didn't really choose this, but it's just how things have to be. It's the only logical consequence to Jason's betrayals. Now Medea then orders the tutor away and addresses her children. Here she starts to lament about how she reared them for nothing because there is no longer any chance that she will witness their happiness as they grow up because, she's going to kill them. She even laments about this stubborn heart of mine, what misery it has cost me, which again suggests that she's actually being caused pain by this idea that she has to kill them. She has a bit of a back and forth here saying, "I could not do it. Goodbye to those plans I made." But then this is countered by the thought of becoming a laughing stock by letting her enemies off scot-free, which in turn leads her to condemn those previous emotions as cowardly thoughts. But then again, she falters. She says, "Stop, my heart. Do not do this deed." Again, this is countered by the realization that she would not leave her children to the mockery of her enemies, which is an interesting way of looking at the idea of, letting her children live. Now the pattern here is that it's very internal. It's a very selfish struggle that Medea is experiencing. She's warring between her love for her children and her love for her reputation. It's about her own feelings. It's not about anyone else's. But ultimately, it's the love for her reputation that ends up coming out on top. A part of her knows that it's not reasonable to kill her children just to hurt their father, but she's too caught up in the emotion. And the line that succinctly characterizes this idea is when she says, "Passion is master of my reason." Now the chorus goes on to explore the nature of parenthood, stating that mortals who have produced children are less fortunate than those who have no experience at all of parenthood. This is primarily due to the fact that people who, for whatever reason, can't have kids are spared many trials. As hard as parents may try to raise kids, they ultimately don't know if they're going to have good children or bad children. What's worse is that even if a kid is raised right, which potentially Medea's kids are, what good does it do for the gods to cast upon them the greater sorrow of an untimely death? After this, a messenger, one of Jason's servants, appears before Medea and beckons her to run away. This is on account of both Glaus and Creon dying as a result of Medea's poisons. Now the messenger explains that Glaus agreed to vouch for the children to stay only after she saw the dress and the coronet, but shortly after putting them on, she became pale, her eyes rolled back, and she started foaming at the mouth. Basically what happens next is the coronet issued a wondrous stream of devouring fire, while the dress began to consume the wretched girl's white flesh. So pretty much the crown sets her on fire, and then the dress pretty much eats her up. Now Glaus pretty much burns until she's dead, and all the servants watching are too freaked out to do anything about it. Now finally Creon appears, and he embraces his child in a fit of grief, but upon touching her dress, it sticks to him. And even when he tries to pull himself free, it tears up his flesh until he finally gives up and he dies with her. Now the messenger makes a final comment saying that Medea will not escape punishment and that no one knows happiness. So they're just being a Debbie Downer. Now after the messenger leaves, the chorus says that it seems heaven has rained many blows justly on the head of Jason. So that sympathy and that loyalty appears to still be intact. Medea then says that she's ready to kill her children, and she will do so quickly. She also thinks that since they have to die, she must be the one to kill them. She says, "I will take their life, I who gave them life." So there's a weird sense of responsibility there, a sense of ownership that Medea has over her children to commit this terrible but necessary deed. As she advances into the house, the chorus remains outside and prays that the gods will intervene, but they don't actually do anything to stop her, even though they're literally right there. A whole chorus of women, but, whatever. Now the boys' screams are heard from inside, but this only causes the chorus to curse Medea and then entertain the thought of intervening. I mean, they say, yes, I will save the children from slaughter, but instead of actually saving the children, they decide to tell us a story about some lady, Ino, who historically was another woman who did some violence to her children. Because apparently, it's more important to talk about some story than actually save some kids from getting stabbed to death by their mother. People. Now anyway, as the chorus tells it, Ino was a woman whom the gods robbed of her senses, so she was a crazy, and because of the blood she shed, she decided to walk off a cliff and, die. Now at this point, Jason rushes into the scene and asks the chorus about Medea's whereabouts, for she must suffer the vengeance of the royal house. Now he's also worried about his children in the fear that people might want to avenge the deaths of the royals by hurting them. Now the chorus, still not trying to help the kids, instead decides to spend its time pitying Jason, saying, "You have no idea of the depth of your misfortune." Jason's like, huh? And then the chorus says, "Medea killed your kids, idiot." Jason is about to burst into the house, but then Medea appears suddenly in a chariot drawn by dragons, and with her are the bodies of her children. And this appearance marks the final episode of the play, generally referred to as the Exodus. Now Medea explains that the chariot on which she is standing was given to her by the sun god Helios, who is her grandfather, in order for her to escape. Now Jason then begins to condemn Medea for her monstrous deed, and that he was stupid to bring her from the barbarous land of Colchis. He understands now that he should have expected such behavior because, she betrayed her father and killed her own brother. Should have figured that one out sooner, Jason, you fool! Now of all the things that he could call her, he just calls her a children killer, because apparently in Jason's mind that's a pretty sick burn. Now, while Jason believes that Medea has brought suffering on herself as well, Medea denies this, saying, "My pain is cancelled now that any mockery of yours is silenced." So again, that love for her own reputation, it's shown to be more important than her love or even her grief for her children. Now, Jason blames Medea as a wicked mother for the deaths of the children, but Medea argues it was their father's weakness that led to their doom. Now, a bit more banter is exchanged between them until finally Jason, in an attempt to be the one that dumps Medea, says, "I welcome the moment of our parting." Ooh! So that's a good breakup line, apparently. Learn to burn, Jason. Now, Medea then disappears, taking the bodies of her children with her, despite Jason's protests to have them back and bury them. Now, obviously, she's headed for Athens, where Aegeus has offered her sanctuary. But anyway, the final line comes from the chorus, and they say, "What men expect does not happen. For the unexpected, heaven finds a way." And so it has turned out here today. So what does this mean? My interpretation is that plans don't always go according to plan. You think about Jason, the dude tried to take the throne in Iolcus, he tried to get the golden fleece, he tried to marry a new wife in Corinth. None of these things worked out for him in the end, and they didn't yield any real benefits. And then for the unexpected, heaven finds a way. So it's due to the intervention of the gods that expectations have kind of become meaningless. Medea just whipping out a chariot drawn by dragons, who saw that coming, right? Then again, the finale or the exodus of this story is often referred to as a deus ex machina, which is Latin for God from the machine, which is basically when something unexpected happens in order to generate a solution to a previously unsolvable problem. Now, these days, we probably see that as a result of poor planning and crappy writing. It's kind of a cop-out ending to a story, but back in the times, apparently, this was not entirely uncommon in Greek theater. Now, in the case of Medea, the unsolvable problem was that she was going to be held accountable for her crimes, but then wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, a big chariot appears out of nowhere and offers her a means to escape. Cool. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the fact that Medea does, in fact, escape. Now, earlier on, I mentioned that part where the chorus first asks Medea not to kill her children because, they're like, I don't think that's a good idea. But the chorus warns Medea specifically about breaking mankind's laws. Now, one of the reasons this final sequence is important is because it prompts an interesting discussion between mankind's laws and the laws of the gods, or rather mortal justice versus divine justice. Now, because Medea is a descendant of Helios, a god, she is not 100% mortal. And also the fact that she is originally from Colchis, which has been conveyed to be a barbarous land that is subject to force, this suggests that maybe Medea maybe she doesn't think the same way as everyone else, at least about justice. Now, we've talked several times about the idea that Medea doesn't have a choice, but that this is just what justice looks like, that she had to do these particular things. Now, her perception of right and wrong is a little bit different, but more importantly, she is not held accountable to the same laws that normal mortals are. The mere fact that she escapes, or is given the means to escape by a god, suggests that at least in the eyes of the gods, she is exempt from her crimes. She was justified in her actions. But anyway, boom, that's the summary and analysis from me, boys and girls. I hope that's helpful before your exams, or just your SACs if you're watching this later at another time. But as always, there's much more for you to analyze. That's just hopefully some of the big areas. Thanks for watching, ladies and gents, and I'll see you next time. Best of luck.